Hey guys, welcome back to another lesson of REG. My name is Jeremias Ramos. I'm going to be your teacher today. This is brought to you by the Daily CPA. So let's just jump right into today's lesson. This is going to be Chapter 3, Part 1, Audits, Appeals, and the Judicial Process. So this is going to be especially painful, so hang tight. I will do my best to cut out all the technical terms as best as I can and give you the meat and potatoes of everything you need to know for this section. So for today's lessons, there's 4 learning outcomes. The first one is explain the audit and appeals process as it relates to federal tax matters. The second one is explain the different levels of the judicial process as they relate to federal tax matters. The third one, identify options available to a taxpayer within the audit and appeals process given a specific scenario. And the last one, identify options available to a taxpayer within the judicial process given a specific scenario. So the first step is examination. Quick side note, all of this relates to dealing with the IRS, so you have to know there's a lot of back and forth. So basically the IRS will select you in a Hunger Games style lottery, of course I'm joking, and inform you that your return is under review. They might ask for some documentations or just come with some changes and request additional taxes due. So essentially they'll come to you, they'll say, hey, we looked at your 2015 return, we noticed this was off, we're coming to you with an additional $5,000 tax due, what do you think? So the first thing you can do is you can agree to it. You can say, hey, I messed up, you're right, here's the money that is due, and that will end the process right there. Your bill will be settled, you'll pay all the tax due, no more problems. But let's say, for example, you don't agree with it. You say, yes, I'm entitled to these tax deductions, yes, I'm entitled to these credits, and I think the IRS is wrong. So if you disagree with the IRS examination, then you can appeal this process. It's a long appeals process, and hopefully somewhere in the middle between dealing with the IRS agent to all the way up to the Supreme Court, you can handle the situation. So the first step is essentially you talk it out with the IRS agent. You say, hey, this is the documentation I have. This is what I think is the proof that I'm entitled to these deductions. What do you think? And if the IRS agent accepts it, then good. If they don't, then you have to go to the next level. The next level is the 30-day and the 90-day letter. So if you can't come to an agreement with the IRS, then they go ahead and process the case. You receive a letter notifying you of your right to appeal the proposed changes within 30 days, which is going to be your 30-day letter. If you ignore that notice, then the IRS will send you a 90-day letter, which is also known as a notice of deficiency, which is essentially saying they want their money. So the next step is to appeal with the IRS. If you choose to appeal, then you have the option of appealing within the IRS itself. You can do this at a local appeals office. It's super informal. If an agreement is still not met, then you may be eligible to take your case to court. Worst case scenario. Right, so let's say, for example, you disagree with the agent disagrees with you, you take it to the appeals process within the IRS, that still isn't worked out, and then you have to actually take it to court if you want to reconcile that situation. So generally you have 3 options when it comes to taking a tax matter to court. The first option is the United States Tax Court. The next 2 options is the United States Courts of Federal Claims or a United States District Court. Now I want you to remember that you're going to lump the tax court as one category, and then 2 other categories is the United States Courts of Federal Claims and the United States District Court, and I'll explain why. So the tax court is fairly different from those 2 other courts I explained because, first of all, the people that are going to hear the case, the judges that are going to hear the case, are trained in income tax, estate tax, gift tax. They actually know the tax code, and they're not just regular judges who have a general sense of the law. They actually are experts within tax matters. And then secondly, when you take something to tax court, you don't have to actually pay the tax that is due. Actually, they won't even hear your case if you have paid the tax already. So what usually happens is you disagree with the IRS, you don't want to pay the amount, you take it to tax court, and then from there, if they rule against you, you have to pay it. If they rule for you, you don't have to pay it. Right? But let's say tax court is not the way you want to go, and just know that the majority of tax court cases are going to go through the tax court, right? But let's say, for example, if for some reason you want to take it to the other two, then you have the federal claims court and the district court. So generally, for these courts, you have to pay the tax first, and then you have to sue the IRS for a refund. Now, there are some differences between these courts, but for the CPA examination, you just have to know, as a general rule, for these courts to hear your case, you have to pay the tax first. So let's say, for example, you take it to the tax court, or you take it to the federal claims court or the district court, and you lose. The next step is the U.S. Court of Appeals. So for this, the U.S. Court of Appeals hears your tax court and district court cases, and then you also have the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit that hears the appeals for the U.S. Court of Federal Claims. Now, I know that's a mouthful, that's a lot to take in. Definitely check out the article. Know the nuances between those two. It might be one or two questions on the examination, but don't harp on it too much. It's going to be a small portion of the exam. The final step is the Supreme Court, right? This is completely rare. It doesn't really happen a lot. It's only matters that impact federal cases or constitutional cases that have significant impact on the tax code. But for the most part, if you have a tax case, it's usually settled at the tax court or the appeals. It usually never reaches the Supreme Court. But there are tax court cases that reach the Supreme Court, and they hold a lot of weight when it comes to tax research and tax matters when it comes to bringing a case to the IRS. So that's pretty much it. Let's just run through everything we learned and make it more simple to remember these concepts. So the first, IRS examines your tax return, right? The first step, you have to get audited. Second step, if you disagree, you can take it to the appeals office within the IRS. It's optional. You can take it straight to court, but usually you work it out with the agent. If you can't work it out with the agent, then you work it out with the appeals office within the IRS. If that doesn't work out, then you take it to court. You can take it to the tax court. If they don't resolve that issue, maybe you take it to the federal claims or the district court. If they don't resolve that issue, then it goes to the U.S. Appeals Court, which is much higher, much more expensive. And then after that, Supreme Court, that's the final stop. So in summary, definitely check out the article. Definitely memorize the differences, the hierarchy of the audit process. This is something that's going to be a few questions on the exam, not too much, but definitely something that you want to look at more closely than other sections.